good evening. Good evening to me. I'm from the UK, but you are from the US of A. This is the first episode of The Soul Archive, and a chat with tonight is Randy McNutt. Good evening, Randy. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Jordan.
It's great to have you here. We've been talking back and forth on email for so long now, haven't we?
Yes,
And
yes,
I just
quite a
thought,
while.
yeah, I thought it'd be great to just get you on and do an interview for the Soul Archive. So basically, because this is the first episode of the Soul Archive, the people's story, I best tell everybody what it's all about. There is two sides of the people's story. There is going to be people over here in the UK that have been dancing to soul music and blue-eyed soul music as well. For X amounts of years. We're going to be interviewing them about their life story, but we want to do two parts of it where we also interview the people behind some of these records and people who have had a connection to some of these people, and that is certainly you. So where did it all start for you, Randy? Where did you get into music, and what was your early memories of hearing music and your journey, really?
It started really when I was in high school. I've always been interested in music. And when I was, very young, I would get 45s. My parents would buy one for me, and I was only about 5 years old. And I just took to it somehow, and I loved that, and I would buy them all the way through high school. And then when I got out of high school, I went before I went to university or anything. I went to a business college because I didn't know what to do with my life after I graduated from our high school. So I went there for a while, and I kept reading Billboard magazine. And across the street was a newsstand, and at lunch at school, I would run over there and buy Billboard and bring it back to the school and sit there on my lunch hour and go through it. And I became obsessed with reading Billboard, and I saw all the names of people in there that became my heroes. People like Chips Moman, the producer from Memphis, and Dan Penn, the songwriter from Muscle Shoals, and all that. So that's really how I got interested in it. And then I needed someone to record. I wanted to produce. I wanted to produce a record like the guys I would read about. And there were some characters I could tell, Huey Mo from Houston and guys like that were doing it independently. So I wanted to do that.
So was your parents into music? Did you have any musical connections through your parents, or?
Well, my dad he played guitar, and my sister played piano. My dad was a big influence because all through my young years, he would sit down and play guitar, and he used to play guitar when he was young with the guy that was on a TV show later called the Midwestern Hayride, and it was on a TV station in Cincinnati. But my dad would just play as a hobby, playing at home, because he had my sister and I and my mother. So he held his day job and never played professionally. So I was into it from early times that way. But I didn't think about that too much until I got in high school, and then I was so into the British invasion with the zombies and all the groups, So when I got out, I wanted to produce a record. Well, what happened was I decided that the time had come, and I left the business college, and I got a job. It was at a safe company. They made saves, and so I was a clerk. And on that small salary, I saved $500 to record. And when I was getting a promotion there at work to a better clerk's job, and they hired a guy to replace me.
Okay.
He went to the same high school that I went to, but I didn't know him very well there. I had seen him around.
Mm.
His name was Wayne Perry.
Right. Okay. I've read a
Yeah,
lot about Wayne.
yeah. So I had to train Wayne to do my job because they had just hired him. And so my boss told me, he said, your job is very hard. I want you to train this guy because I don't want anything to go wrong. He said it was hard enough to find you because he said I could type, and they couldn't get a lot of guys that could type in those days.
Right. Okay.
We're talking years ago, back in the early 70s.
So was that the first time that you met Wayne?
Yeah, well, yeah, he had went to my high school, but I didn't know him very well.
Yeah.
And I had seen him around, but I didn't know him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he comes in, and he was a rather small guy, and he struts in and had some real wild clothes on,
Mhm.
and so I thought this guy's different. And so I trained him, and during the course of this training period, which went on for 6 weeks, we got to be friends, and we'd hang out together and do things. And he said, "Hey," he said, he came to work one day, and I said, "Wow, you look pretty tired." He goes, "Well, yeah." He said, I was up last night till 2 in the morning playing music." I said, "You play music 4 nights a week and you work here too?" And he says, "Yeah." And so he played at a club north of our town, Hamilton, Ohio, which is
Okay.
about 25 miles north of Cincinnati. So he said, "You should come and see me." So I did. And they had a great band that he was with called the Young Breed.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
I was not into Blue Eyed Soul too much. I mean, I liked it, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to record it. I wanted to record a top 40 rock band.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one day, Wayne said to me, "Hey, man, how about recording me?" Well, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't know what to do. So I said, "Okay." So we took my 500, we took the $500, and we didn't know of any studio, but he had cut a demo album for Atlantic Records at one time, or the group had. So he knew about the studio in north of Cincinnati called Jewel Recording. So we went down there, and I found a song called "Mr. Bus Driver." Was written by Wayne Carson Thompson, who was a well-known writer in soul and rock. And we cut it with the Young Breed, which was it had people that used to play for Lonnie Mack, the great guitarist that had
Oh yes.
Memphis.
Yes.
And we needed horn players, so we tapped a group called the Daps from Cincinnati, which is kind of a legendary funk band now. And in fact, I believe they just might have been the first funk band ever. So we got the horn players and brought them in, and pretty much had the record finished. And that was our first one.
I find that incredible. Really, how so you hasn't been in a studio before that. Am I right
No,
saying that? So you just walked into a studio and
yeah,
just pulled this together. How did you know what you was doing?
I didn't.
You
I didn't know
didn't.
what I was
Just
doing.
went in blind.
Yeah, I did go in a studio while I was working at while I was at the business college. I found a little studio in Hamilton, and I just walked in the door and I said, "You mind if I watch?" And they looked at me like, "Oh, this guy, what is he doing?" And they said no. So I sat there and watched, but I didn't learn anything.
Mm.
So Wayne and I went down to Jewel Studios. We brought the band in. Wayne said, "We've got to wait till we finish playing." Um, and that they got off at 1 in the morning, and then they had to drive down to Jewel, which was about 45-minute drive. So we didn't start until 2 in the morning. We ended up quitting about 5 in the morning, and then I had to drive home. I was ready to pass out by then.
Yeah, I
But
bet. I
we,
bet.
we put it together. We did the rhythm track, and then we came back and did Wayne's vocals. So it was multi-track, an 8-track recorder, which in early 70s, that was pretty much state of the art. Everybody
Yes.
had
Yeah.
one, and they were coming off 4 tracks. Then we finished it. Then we needed a B-side. So I was out of money, and I could scrape together a little bit. And Wayne said, I found a band. I don't remember who they were. And he says, they'll do it for free. So we got those guys in the studio, and they had horns and everything. And they weren't as good as the Young Breed, but they were good enough.
Yeah.
So we needed a song. I said to Wayne, I've never written a song. And he says, I haven't either. I said, you want to try? So I said, well, I wrote some lyrics to a bubblegum song that I wanted to do one time, because that'll do. So we had an office where we worked, and it was out at the factory in the safe company. And he came in and he sat there, and our supervisor was gone, and it was a little room. And so I said, here's the lyrics, Wayne. And he looked at it and he goes, okay. So he just sat there with no guitar or anything. He goes, come on, baby, give me the green light. He just came up with it on his own with no instrument. So I said, we don't have any tape recorder. How are you going to remember that? He goes, I'll remember. So he went home and had a cassette tape recorder and sang it. So we went down to Jewel and we cut that. So that's how we got the B-side.
That's amazing. It really is amazing. I find it incredible that do you know what I mean? You just, things were, like people say, things are meant to be, but you guys just coming together, although you knew him in high school, coming together with your job and then just saying, do you want to record some music? That is incredible. So
even
Mr.
in high school, I didn't know him really. I had just heard his name, but we were thrown together during this training period, and we went to hear the Daps one night after work, and I thought they were fantastic, and we ended up using those horn players.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were totally incompetent. We didn't know what we were doing, but the engineer was excellent, Gene Lawson, and he had played drums on Memphis by Lonnie Mack. And Gene was a very bright guy, knew a lot about electronics, and he helped us quite a bit. But that's how we put together our first record.
So, Mr. Bus Driver, that was your first record. I'm just looking at your compilation. I've got it up on the side of the screen because you put out a compilation, didn't you? And there's some fantastic, great Blue-Eyed Soul tracks on that, and some of the tracks are previously unreleased as well. So tell us about them, the previously unreleased ones. Why did they get put in the can and other ones went out? What was the story?
The label in New York, I had pitched them an idea to put this album out of 70s soul music, but white soul. And I didn't hear anything from them. I thought, well, they're not going to do it. One day, the phone rang, and it was the guy that owned the label, and he said, "Hey, I love it. I want to put it out." So he said, there's a problem. He said, you've only got about 12 cuts. He goes, I'm going to need at least 15 to 17. I said, well, I don't know how much more. I said, I've pretty much tapped everything. But so I went back and got my old tapes out, and I found a few things that we could use. And so I finally came up with the number he wanted, although some of them, it was a bit of a stretch, but it made it on there.
It's a fantastic compilation. I really enjoyed listening to it. I really did. And another track I really want to ask you about, because, and I know a lot of the viewers who will be watching this interview will want me to ask about Little Flint and Penn.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know the history behind that, because that has become, so it's got a bit of a cult following in the UK. We have dance halls, and we have had these dances. Well, they started in the early 60s, throughout the 70s, and the main focus is black soul music, but there is a lot of great blue-eyed soul music that gets mixed in, as long as it's got a great dance beat and it's up tempo. They get played, yes. And that is a track I know has a following. So I'd love to know about that, because before you go into it, I did a little bit of research, because I was talking to a friend of mine about Little Flint and Penn and telling him all about you, and he says, oh, I played that record. He said, but I've got it by the Mystics.
Yes. I didn't know this when I recorded, but there were probably a half a dozen versions out. it's a good thing I didn't hear them, because we just did what we wanted, and we weren't influenced by anyone that way.
Yeah, 'cause I'm just looking the Mystics. Oh, Nova's 9.
They
Yeah,
did
that
it originally, yeah.
yeah, 1968. The Mystics was at 1979, and then Little Flint in 1970. Is that correct?
Uh, well, Little Flint, we did that in 1972,
Ah, right. Okay.
and it came out on my label. We were about 73.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So that label was yours then, was it?
yeah,
Beast.
Beast Records.
Yeah. Did it only have one release on it?
One release, that's it.
Wow, wow, wow. So
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? It's a collectible record now, that, and
Oh,
it's a
thank you.
fantastic 45, and it did get a re-release as well. Was that in 2020? That was that last year. It got a re-release.
Let's see. Yes, it was last year, with Nick Weston's label.
So could you tell us anything about the recording session of that?
Oh, sure.
Who
Yeah.
Little Flint was?
Yes. Well, I remember it distinctly, because that was our second record, and the way we worked is we were a team, and we dreamed up a name called PM Productions for Perry McNutt, and we became independent producers. And this is what I always wanted to do. And Wayne never gave that any thought. He just wanted to be a singer.
Mm.
And as you can tell, he's a pretty good blue-eyed soul singer. So I had to pick the material. So I would scrounge around in the cutout bins and stores where you could get 10 for $1, 45s. And then if I saw somebody's name on there, like a producer or writer that I liked, I would buy it, take it home,
Right.
play
Okay.
it.
That's
And
interesting. That's
yeah,
interesting itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And albums too, but mainly singles. I would look for those. And so I knew already what I was looking for, as far as either a producer or the writer, or some kind of connection with things that I liked. Well, in this case, I didn't find Pain that way. I found it on an album by the Grassroots. And for your viewers who don't know about the Grassroots, they were a very popular, big time top 40 rock band in America, and had a worldwide reputation. And they just did straight out commercial rock and roll. So I had an album, and I was playing it, and the song Pain came up. They did it. It was never a single. And I listened to it, and I thought, hey, Wayne could really tear that up. But I'd have to do a different arrangement, because it was, we wanted to do a blue-eyed soul.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I played it for Wayne. He goes, oh yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. He said, let me take that record. So he sat down and practiced it, and felt comfortable with it. So again, we go down to Jewel Recording, and we did the rhythm track, and then later, it was multi-track, so we could overdub at any time. So we brought in later the horn players, and again we went to some guys from the Daps. The story is just strange, but it's a wonder that record ever came out. We cut it. The rhythm track, we used, let's see, there was a guy named Roger Troy. His nickname was Jelly Roll. And yeah, and he was from Cincinnati, and he sounded like David Clayton Thomas from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And he was a terrific bass player. So we did another track about the time we did Pain, and we had him play on that. So we wanted to use him. He was on Cap Records out of New York at the time.
Oh yeah, no Cap. Yeah.
Yeah. He had his album out, Jelly Roll. It was the name of the album. And there were a lot of Cincinnati blue-eyed soul players on that album. And I had the album, and I liked some of the people on there. So some of the people from Jelly Roll played on Pain.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
Roger Troy, and we were recording this thing, and suddenly the studio, the door to the office, there was nobody out there, and the door opens, and some guy we didn't know sticks his head in, and he said, "Hey, who owns that nice Firebird out there in front of the studio?" And Jelly Roll said, "I do." He goes, "Well, it just got repossessed."
Oh,
So there was like, I don't know why I remember stuff like that, but it was pretty, So
it's
we
great.
had,
It helps.
yeah,
It helps paint a picture of what it was like.
yeah, it was hilarious at the time, although Jelly Roll was pretty upset. So he played bass. Let me think here. A guy named Gary Boston played guitar, and Gary is still playing around this area. I used him on a session last year. I was doing a record. There was a group called Bo Dollar and the Coins, who were a blue-eyed soul band, and Bo Dollar was helped James Brown a lot, and so Bo died a few years ago. But I brought some of the Coins in, and I recorded them just because it was, historic.
So
And
that was only last year.
yeah, I did that. Yeah, so
That's still great that you're still recording music.
yeah, I'm still doing stuff, now and then. Although the pandemic has squashed that, but
Yeah.
um, anyhow, Gary Boston, I dug him up, and he played guitar, and I found a guy named Ray Heckman who was with the Coins, and he played sax, and Wayne Bullock, who was the organ player for uh, the Coins, he played on it. And Wayne, he's a great player. He was on Mr. Bus Driver. He played organ on that. So anyhow, we got these guys in the studio, and they listened to the song, and they hadn't heard it before, and we just, they just listened to it and did a few takes, and we had it. Wayne sang lead. The one side that you hear on that 45, Wayne is singing solo. He's singing by himself. That was the first way that we did it. And I liked that. I thought that was really good. Well, Wayne said, he called me up one day. He goes, "Hey, I found some guy at this little bar or something up by another town where we live. And so he said, he would be great. We ought to use him on Pain." And I said, "Why would we want him?" And he goes, "Well, he could do like a duet with me, and it would be very powerful."
Right.
So
Okay.
I said, "Well, okay." I sort of let Wayne, he let me pick the songs, and I let him kind of do what he wanted on the vocals.
Yeah.
So we went up and heard this guy, and he was from Alaska. I just remembered that, but I don't remember his name. So I just walked up. I said, "Hey, you want to cut a record?" "Well, sure." So we took him down to Jewel, and Wayne, we had Wayne's vocal on there. So we dubbed this guy on with Wayne, and Wayne was very pleased about that. I always preferred Wayne's solo version myself. So let me think here. We didn't have a B-side, so we had already cut another group, and we plopped that on the B-side. So Little Flint, how did that come about? There was no Little Flint. We finished Pain, and I still remember Wayne's walking in the studio, and I said, "Hey, Wayne, you want your name on that? How do you want to do that?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Let's just put Little Flint," and right off the top of his head. And I said, "Well, whatever you want, I mean, I thought
Yeah.
it'd be good with your name on it." But so when I put the record out, I put Little Flint featuring Wayne Perry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But we cut this thing, and then I was going to the university at the time. I had went on to a regular university, so I didn't have much money at all, and I didn't have much time. So we did the track, and I just let it lay around. I didn't have time to do anything. So one day I went over to Wayne's house, and his father had an upholstery shop in back of the house where they lived. And I walked in, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Perry, is Wayne around?" And he goes, "No, he's not here." he said, "Hey, Randy, what do you guys got going?" So I told him about Payne. He said, "Wayne hasn't shown much interest in it. I haven't heard anything." He goes, "How much would that cost to put out?" I said, "Well, $300, we can press it, or 400." So he wrote a check on the spot. And he said, "Go ahead." He said, "I'm really happy you guys are doing
Wow.
this." So I I needed a label. So I thought, well, I'll start my own label. So I came up with that name just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And some guy at school, I forget what he had said, uh, "Hey, you beast," or something like that. He said to me, and it struck me, So I called it Beast Records. Another guy went to college with them. I said, "Hey, he was an art student. I said, can you draw a picture of a King Kong on top of the very tip of the Empire State Building throwing a paper airplane?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." So that was the logo. And I took the tape down to uh, this record company called Counterpart Records in
Right.
Cincinnati.
Yeah, I've
They had
seen
a
it. Yeah.
yeah lot of regional hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they had. I thought they were a big label when I was in high school. I thought it might be like Mercury or something because they had so many regional hits in our area that they played. So I took it down to the guy that owned it, and I played the thing for him. And I had met him before because he had a studio. He listened to that and he said, "I like that. I like that a lot." He said, "That's pretty good." He said, I don't know about putting it out on Counterpart." He said, "I've got some new bands and I don't really have the budget." I said, "Well, I've got some money to press it." And he goes, "I'll make you a deal. You want to pay for it? I'll distribute your label through Counterpart." I said, "Oh, sure, great." So he took care of the rest, pressed it in Nashville, and he said, "Come on down and pick up the records." So I had about 500 of them, and he says, "Do you want to get them distributed, right?" And I said, "Uh huh." He
Yeah.
said, "Well, take it over to my distributor, A1 Distributing in Cincinnati, and then if we get airplay, they will put it in the stores." So I remember it was raining, and I took two boxes. They were probably 2.5, 3 feet long, and they were narrow. And I put them under under my arm and with the other arm. And I ran up to the door and I walked in, and nobody was there. And it was an old building. And I yelled, and this old guy came out. And I said, "Shad sent me. He wants to distribute my records. He told me to bring a couple of them over." So I had the two boxes. He looked at me and said, "Kid," he meant two records, not two boxes. Because
Oh.
he said, "What do you think I'm going to do with two boxes?" He said, "Take a look around here. I got everybody's record in here." He said, "I don't have, this." So I forgot about it. I was going to school and I just let it drop. And I took the boxes and I put them at my mother's house where I was living at the time. And there was an old workbench in the basement. I just put them there, forgot about it. Time went on, years went on, and occasionally somebody would want one. And a lady in the UK bought a 25 or so from me, but I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't think anything about it. I went on to cut more records,
Mm.
and Payne was forgotten.
Yeah, you just moved on. You moved. How many records were pressed? Do you remember? Do you know off the top of
500,
your head? 500.
500. Yeah, I believe 500. Yeah. And so the years went by. I cut many, many more records with Wayne. And then I got into rockabilly and cut quite a bit of that. And Wayne had moved on to Nashville. I said, I want to have you stay in Cincinnati, but you can't make a living as a writer and producer here. I said, you should go to Nashville if you're serious. Because I had another job. I started working for a newspaper as a reporter. Well, we cut a lot of stuff, but Wayne went to Nashville, so I got off on my own little tangent. I liked rockabilly, so I found those guys and recorded them, some of the original guys. And then I did some country stuff, pop stuff. Meanwhile, Payne is still sitting on the workbench down in my mother's basement. Years have gone by. many times she said to me, "Hey, those records down there, why don't you just throw them away? Nobody wants them." I said,
Oh,
"No, just leave them there, you know." So anyhow, one day, I think how this went. Some guy I ran into, he said, "Hey, your record's all over YouTube." I said, "Oh, my new one?" And he goes, "No," he said, "it's something called Pain." So I thought, well, that's interesting. How did anybody hear about it? Because it's sitting on my mother's workbench. Um, so I didn't do anything based on that. And then one day, this guy from Arizona who used to live in Cincinnati, he called me and said, "I want to cut that record Pain." Uh, I said, "Well, you don't need my permission. I don't own the publishing." So he cut it, and he said, "Oh, everybody is really likes your record." So years went by. I mean, a long time, and I get a call from Nick Weston, and he said, "I'd like to put that out." And I said, "No, I do have to warn you about this. You do know, don't you, that record is like 40 years old?" I said, "That record's older than you."
yeah,
Probably. I
yeah.
don't know him, but So he said, "Oh, I don't care how old it is." He said, "You can dance to it, and it's a nice record." So I had to get the rights from the label in New York, but it took years. I mean, what you hear is something that had been around all that time. Anyhow, you asked me how the two versions were named.
Yeah.
Little Flint, I gave that credit to, let's see, I believe it was the duet. And the original Little Flint that Wayne sang solo was never released. So when that album came out, the CD, I put the
Yes.
unreleased version on there because I needed some tracks. And even though I liked his version originally, he liked the other one, so we went with that. So that's how it came about. But there were many side stories about that. It was just strange, but I guess it was meant to come out.
Yeah, I'm just so glad, that people from the UK managed to get in touch with you and tell you it was
Yeah,
getting played over here, because it's this is one of the most joyful things I get out of connecting with people, tracking people down, as you know, and letting them know that the music is loved, because at times getting on and people don't realize. I've only just over the last few days, I've just found two sisters who sang together in Detroit, and
yes,
they had just totally forgot about the career in music. And
yeah.
it brings me so much joy to just let you know that your music is loved, basically. And
Well, thank you.
the Little Flint record, and yeah,
Yes,
it's just
yeah,
fantastic. And another thing, the reason why me and you, because we started talking accidentally
yeah. It's
originally.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah, I was doing some research into Herman Lewis Griffin, and I
yes.
know the viewers here will know all about him. But can you tell us any memories that you have of Herman Lewis and
Oh, sure.
his time in Cincinnati?
Well, yes. Wayne and I, to backtrack here a little bit, we after we finished Mr. Bus Driver, we didn't go directly to Counterpart Records to put it out. We got a deal with Avco Embassy Records in New York, and Herman was responsible for that. Now, I didn't know Herman, but Herman was in Jewel Studios to buy some tape or something, and the owner was Rusty York, who was a well-known rockabilly and country musician. He owned that, and he said, "Hey, Herman, you want to hear the best thing ever cut in this studio?" Herman said, "Sure." So he played him Mr. Bus Driver,
Oh
and
wow,
yeah,
that must have
and
felt pretty great at the time.
yeah, that was a freak thing because Wayne and I hadn't been able to do anything. We had to deal with Fraternity Records in Cincinnati, but another label put out the same song, and the owner of the label, even though he had signed us, he said, "I can't do it. I can't get into a financial war with Diamond Records in New York." So that didn't work out. So meanwhile, we went to Memphis, and we almost had a deal down there with a label, but that owner, he was the CEO of the label. He got fired before he could put it out. So anyway, Herman hears it, and he said, I might be able to help those guys." I had no idea who Herman Griffin was. So his sort of partner was a guy named Gordon Neal, and you're aware of Gordy.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, Gordy listened to it, and he said, "Herman told me about your song," and he said, "Come over to my apartment and I'll listen to it." So he did, and he said, "Yeah, it's pretty good." He said, "We might be able to do something." So Herman took it to New York along with some things that Herman had made. Now Herman, I had no idea. I didn't know that he had records out on Columbia and Mercury and a lot of big labels.
And Motown as well.
Yeah, he was. If he told me once, he was the original artist on Motown.
Yeah.
If he wasn't, he had to be, the first among the first three. But anyhow, he takes it to New York, and he had 5 offers from pretty big size labels, but he went with Avco Embassy. Well, they didn't put it out, and so I got an advance, and with that advance, I used that to cut pain. That's how I paid for it.
For any of the listeners listening in, Gordon Neal was responsible for a label called Prime, and any of the connoisseur collectors that are listening will know of David Thomas's track called "I'll Always Need You," and Gordon Neal, he was the guy behind that. Just for the listeners,
you know more about Gordy than I do. I mean, I didn't know about some of this about Gordon, but he was a producer, and but he worked with Herman. Well, anyhow, Herman, we didn't stay in touch a lot, but somewhat. And then one day, Herman called me, and he said, "Why don't you come down to my house and we'll just visit?" So I went down, and we're sitting there just talking. His wife was Gigi and the Charmaines, and she was she was a fantastic singer and sang background on a lot of things in Cincinnati, Lonnie Mac's records and things like that. And the group was on Fraternity Records at one time, but they were also on Columbia, and Herman was responsible for all that. Well, Herman said to her, "Gigi, get the scrapbook." So I didn't know what was going on. So she came out with a scrapbook that was about 6 inches thick. And I sat there on the couch and with Herman, and he starts paging through this thing. And there's pictures of Herman with the Beatles and all the big groups over there that I loved, Jerry and the Pacemakers and all these people. So I said, how in the world did this happen? Well, Herman had been married to Mary Wells, the big star, one of the big stars on Motown, had My Guy. They were married briefly, and she went to the UK on tour, and Herman went with her. He managed her, and so that's how all those pictures came about. But then
from that tour in the UK, the first tour of the UK, nobody can get over it now, but it was a total flop. They traveled the UK, some of these biggest Motown acts, and it was set up by, there's a guy who was at the UK's, he ran the UK fan club, and he contacted Berry Gordy to get all these acts over and said, there'll be thousands of people. And when he toured, it's half empty, all these big ballrooms and everything. Yeah. But I bet the photos must have been from them early tours.
That's probably it. Yeah. A lot of newspaper stories written. It was a regular scrapbook. He had a lot in it. But I didn't realize that it was a flop like that. But anyway, Herman said, he had heard Pain. And he said, did anything ever come out of that? And I said, no. So he said, I'm cutting a new album for the group The Boys in the Band, and which is another studio group. Basically, it was like Pain, where he just hired studio musicians, and he sang it. And there was really no boys in the band, just like there was no Little Flint.
Mm.
So he said, I've got an album coming. I want to put an album out by the boys in the band. And he said, I heard Pain and I'd like to put that on the album. And he said, you've got another track on there too I'd like to have. I said, oh, sure, that'd be great. And he said, we might need a couple other things. He said, you got anything? I said, no, but we can record them. So we went in and did, we did two tracks. And that was for the Boys in the Band album, which unfortunately did not come out because of a recession hit about that time. And disco was big. This would have been roughly 1979, 80. And it just, Herman couldn't place it with the label because of the recession. And the disco thing kind of hurt too, because a lot of it was not disco music. But we did two tracks. One of them, Wayne was writing a lot at that time. And I said, Wayne, we need something, a great beat. You can dance to it. And I want horns on it. And I want you to write it. So he came up with this song called Get 'Em While They're Hot. And so, we thought, oh, that could be something. So we cut it. Herman and I and Wayne produced it together. And then we did another ballad called Take the Chance to Love Again, which Wayne wrote, and which has a great sax in it. And so, we didn't do anything with those immediately. And then Herman's album flopped, so nothing ever happened with those.
Yeah.
So I had them laying around, so I put them on the CD Sold Out, which you were talking about.
Yes.
And they had never been released. Those were unreleased tracks.
It's fantastic. No, it's fantastic that they actually finally got a release on that album anyway. I'm going to backtrack you a little bit there, because you put me onto a 45 over email, which I'd never heard before, and I really loved it. And it was Westbound Freeway, Right or Wrong.
Yeah.
So what was that all about? How did you get involved? How did you have involvement in that 45?
Well, Wayne had started writing. I kept pestering him. I kept saying, you've got to write. I can't keep finding material for you that's good. I said, you got to write. Can't you write a song? You wrote Give Me the Green Light for the backside of Mr. Bus Driver. And he said, well, I don't know. So he came up with, we had a record out on him called Just a Matter of Time, which was a ballad. And it really wasn't a Blue-Eyed Soul thing. I can't describe it. It was more pop.
Yeah.
So he wrote that. He came over to my house. I was going to the university at the time, living at home. My mother said, hey, Randy, Wayne's here. He comes running in with his guitar. He says, I wrote a song. I said, oh, great. So he played it. And I said, well, it's good. But, if you don't mind me tinkering with it a little bit, you need a hook line. And he said, what's that? I said, well, an identifiable line that when somebody hears it on the radio, they can say, oh, that's called Just a Matter of Time. Mm. He says, oh, yeah, I never thought of that. So he changed it around a little bit, and we recorded that down at the Counterpart Studios. And we did a few things down there. So a couple years go by, 3 years or so, and I had the itch to record again. So I found a little studio in Hamilton where I lived, and Rusty York, who had Jewel, he had owned it, but two other guys bought it. So I went in and pitched an idea to him. I said, look, I don't have much money, but if you want to go in with me on this, you can co-produce it, and we'll do a three-way production thing with Wayne, me, and the one guy that owned it. So I said, Wayne and I will pay for the musicians. So he agreed, and he had an 8-track Ampex, and it was not a bad little studio. So Wayne, we needed a song. So I said, Wayne, you've got to write a song. So he called me. I still remember it was on a Saturday. I was at my aunt's house, and I helped her with, little chores. So I answered, and he goes, hey, check this out. I've got a song. It's pretty good. I said, okay. He said, let me play it for you right now. So he put the phone down and he had his
Wow.
guitar and he sang it right
Yeah.
there, and it was Right or Wrong. I said, Wayne, that's the best thing you've written. So we went in and cut it at this place called Studio B, the one in Hamilton. And Wayne knew all the good musicians. He knew them, and he had a good ear for finding guys that could do that. So we brought them in, and we cut it, within like an hour or something. They were so good they could just knock it out, and Wayne sang the vocal, and it was a record for him. So we mixed it there, and we were really pleased with it. So I don't know. After a few weeks, I said, "Hey, I got an idea." I said, "We had to find an R&B group to do this ballad." And he said, "Yeah, it's like disco time. Who's going to play the ballad?" I said, "Well,
Yeah.
ballads are still played. I said, "But I think we'd have a better chance with an R&B group." He said, "That's a pretty good idea." I said, "We've got your version also, so we don't have to use one and not the other." So we didn't know who to find. Even Wayne didn't really know anybody that would do it. So one day, I don't know who it was. Somebody called me and said, "I heard about an R&B group down at a TV station in Cincinnati. They had their version of Soul Train, kind of." So there was a band there called Westbound Freeway. So Wayne and I went down there on a weeknight, and they were taping the show, and these guys were up there singing, and we liked them. So they got finished, and I just walked up to them and said, "Hey, you guys want to cut a record?" They said,
Wow.
"Sure." I said, "Well, you don't have to do anything. All you got to do is come in and sing it." So I gave them a tape, and they listened to it, and they worked up their vocal arrangements, what they wanted to do. And essentially, it was what Wayne did, except it was kind of a little neater because they had more than one singer, and they
Yeah.
could do little things that Wayne didn't do. So we had those guys, but we had a problem. We really ran out of money. We didn't have any money. So uh, Rusty York, who had Jewel Studios, he had an attorney, and he was a musician, and he opened a little studio in his basement. And in those days, the basement studios, if there were a few, but they weren't that good. The equipment wasn't, really. It
Yeah.
was more semi-pro. So all we needed was a vocal. So we set it up with him, and we go over, and those guys had Right or Wrong down just perfectly. I mean, when we went in and they sang it 3 times or so, and we said, "Hey, great, we'll do it."
Wow.
So after that, uh, the final version had to be done with the mix. So I got this. I love these studios. We'd go to different big ones, that were pretty neat. Had legendary places like Woodland and Nashville. So I always wanted to record at this place called Allegro Sound Studios in New York. So Wayne and I and the guy that had the little studio where we recorded, we all three jumped in his van and drove to New York, which was a story in itself. But it was we had I called Allegro, and I said, I wondered if you might have any time open on this particular day that we could go. And the guy said, "Okay, how many hours do you want? What are you going to do?" I said, "I want a mix." He goes, "Okay." I said, "Could we get 1 hour?" And there was this giant pause, and the guy said, "An hour?" He said, "You're kidding, aren't you?" And I said, "No, I'm serious." He goes, "Well, yeah, I guess we could give you an hour. Sure. Usually we get 4 or 5 hours booked at a time, but
Yeah.
so we took this 8-track tape to Allegro, and it was on like a Friday. It was late in the afternoon, and we mixed it. We did it in an hour. The engineer was fantastic, and we found out he was from Cleveland, which is in Ohio, where I live. And it sounded, the mix there was so much better than we could have done in that little studio back home. So that's how Right or Wrong came together. Well, I came home with the tape, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I took it down to Fraternity Records in Cincinnati that had a lot of hits years ago. And the owner said, he said, that's pretty good. He said, I'd like to put it out. I said, okay. He said, you got a B-side. I said, no, we didn't have enough money to make one. So I had an idea. I said to Wayne, why don't we take the pull the vocals down and just use the rhythm track, and you get on there and play acoustic guitar with that, and we'll just put another name on for a song.
Yes.
And that's what we did.
A lot of people, I think, used to do the same thing because, I've got so many rare 45s, and thinking about it now, just listening to you say that, that's probably why they've got instrumentals on the flip, because they probably didn't have enough cash to do a B-side.
Yeah, a lot of times the producers would take the same rhythm track and just pull the vocal off and use it, maybe put another instrument over that as an instrumental version.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's basically what we did. So I said to the guy, don't worry about that. We'll come up with the B-side. So he says, okay, I'll put it out. So that's how that came out, and it got play here and there across the country. But the guy had no promotion much. He had low budget, and he had one promotion
track. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it when you sent me that email telling me about it, and I loved it. I've not stopped playing it really. It's great. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. It's fantastic.
You'll be getting one in the mail pretty soon.
Thank you. Can't wait for that. So it's been incredible. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Because I've just really enjoyed just sitting here and just taking it all in, because I can just see your passion. You are so passionate about your career in music. It's been fantastic. It really has.
Well, thanks. I don't know if I'd call it a career, but it has lasted a long time. It's like it was kind of like an alcoholic. I would go along pretty good and then suddenly fall off the wagon again and have to record. One time I went 15 years without doing anything. And so suddenly I had an idea and I went back in the studio. But I've recorded sporadically over many years. I never had a lot of hits. I had, one that hit the Billboard, hit the Cashbox chart up about halfway up, but it got to the point where I didn't care about getting radio play. I wanted to do things that I liked.
Yeah, you want to just be creative and just do your thing. Yeah,
I wanted to have fun with it. Here's the other side of the story, which some of your viewers might not know. Wayne and I worked together. We were good friends, and we did this for a number of years. He took my suggestion. He went to Nashville. Wayne struggled trying to make a living as a songwriter, and he would call me up at the office where I worked and at the newspaper, and he'd say, "I'm just ready to give up." He said, "It's just no use." I said, "Look, you're too good." I said, "You can sing and write better than 3/4 of the people walking down the streets at Music Row." I said, "You're really good," and he kept going. So finally, he had a record out, the country record down there by, I forget the singer's name, but it was on Capitol, and it got about halfway up the Billboard chart, and that really got Wayne started. And after that, he wrote a hit by the Forrester sisters. I'm trying to think of the name of that now. There Goes My Heart Again. And right after that, he went on a roll. I believe he wrote 5 number-1 records. He wrote for the Backstreet Boys. He wrote for many of the. He had a record. I believe that it was a single in the UK, but I'm not sure. I think it was called "Anyway for You" or something like that. But it wasn't a single out here in the States, but it was on an album. But he came over to my house one night. Whenever he'd come into town, he'd stop by, and he'd always say, "Come out in the car," because he had a really good sound system.
Yeah.
So he popped this demo in of that song, and he said, "This group, the Backstreet Boys, is going to cut it." And I said, "Who are they?" And he goes, "Well, I'm not quite sure, but they hadn't had anything out yet." And but he I heard a lot of the demos before these hits were ever made. he had Lori Morgan, who was a big country singer. He wrote something for her called "What Part of No Don't You Understand?" and things like that. So Wayne went on to big things in Nashville, and meanwhile, it was like a fork in the road where Wayne went that way and I went the opposite way, where I didn't care if I had a record on the radio because, frankly, I was tired of those games.
Yeah.
Trying to,
Yes.
you had a good record. If you didn't have a lot of money behind it, you couldn't promote it.
Mm.
And and the record that I had that was on, it got up to about 64 or something on the Cashbox chart, and it got on a couple other charts, but not as high. But it was a country rockabilly thing. That one, we did hire a promotion man to work it, and that's how it got on there. But essentially, I didn't really care anymore about that. I just wanted to have fun doing it, which was the opposite of Wayne. And so I had a number of records out. And Wayne, when he called me one day and he said, and I started a new label called General Store Records. And I named it after an old country music show that was on the radio many years ago called General Store. And so it was a country label basically. And so Wayne said, if I had a record out, it would make me look a lot better in Nashville because it looked like I had a record deal. He said, all the songwriters are scrambling trying to get record deals. I said, well, why would you want a record out in General Store? And he said, well, I don't know of anybody else that would do it. And I said, well, I wouldn't want to cut country on you, but if we could do a pop record that sounded a little country. And so he said, that's good, whatever you want. So I can't remember why I didn't have him write the thing. It was before he had his big string of hits. And I found a song called Jennifer that Barry Mann had written. And I found it the same way going through the old cutout bins where they had, 245s in this bin and you could get them for, a dime. And they had a hole punched in them so that they couldn't be
Yes.
sold other
You
than
couldn't
that.
bring them back.
Yeah. So I found, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I found this record called Jennifer. It was a B-side that Barry Mann, the famous songwriter, had written and recorded. So I didn't like the A side, and I was going to just toss it, and because I had a stack of these records, I was looking for songs. But I don't know why I turned it over and played it, and I thought, gosh, that is a fantastic song. Why wasn't this the A side? It's just beautiful. So I took it to a studio and worked with the arranger and cut the whole thing except for Wayne's vocal, and had strings on it and things. So I had it was a pretty big production. It wasn't huge, but it had like a Baroque sound. It was really pretty interesting. So I said, Wayne, your record's done. He says, what? And I said, yeah, it's finished. Just come up and sing it. It's in your key. I made it for you. He came up. He did about 4 vocal takes, and we liked one. We kept that, mixed it, and I put it out. And it got some picks in the trades, particularly in Nashville, Music Row magazine, and I don't know, Cashbox, different things. But I had no money to promote a record like that. I wasn't, I didn't need any promotion money pretty much with the kind of stuff I was doing, like old time country and things like that. So I just sent them out and hoped for the best. So we got some play, and Wayne was very pleased because he wanted a record, and then suddenly opens Music Row magazine, and there's the pick, after that it was pretty much forgotten, but it was probably the best thing I ever did. It was a really good record, very very pretty record. It was every time I play it for people that they're moved by it. It's Barry Mann was great. Well, anyway, years later, I met Barry Mann, and I'm looking at this guy thinking, whoa, this guy wrote "You've Lost That Love and Feeling" and about thousands. I mean, really, he had thousands of chart records, and nice and super nice guy, really really neat, and a lot of the big time artists and behind the scenes people are really nice. So I said to Barry, man, Barry, I recorded a song that you did one time. He said, oh yeah, what was that? I said, Jennifer. And his face lit up. He smiled. He said, oh, Jennifer, yeah. And but that's how the lyric goes. Oh, my Jennifer, Jennifer, I loved you forever, something like that. But Barry Mann was cool. When I told him that, it was he was very pleased. And I thought, hey, the record didn't even do anything, and he was happy about it.
Yeah, something he was passionate about anyway.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
that's
fantastic.
pretty much how Wayne, then he got launched into his songwriting career. I would say that Wayne, you apparently like his blue-eyed soul vocals,
Yes, love him.
and
Yeah.
but Wayne was so versatile that he could sing country, pop, blue-eyed soul. I play Wayne's early things for people, and then I pop in a later thing. One day I played Mr. Bus Driver something for some guy, and then I said, "You want to hear another one?" And he said, "Yeah." I put on Jennifer. He goes, "Come on, that's not the same guy." I said, "Yeah, yeah, it's the same guy." He just he got out of Blue Eyed Soul when he went to Nashville, and he wrote a lot of country things, but he loved all that stuff. He loved the country as well as Blue Eyed Soul. I mean, he just stopped singing it, but didn't mean he didn't like it.
Yeah. So you're talking about him in past tense there.
Yeah,
Is he
Wayne.
still? Is he
No,
still?
Wayne died.
No,
Yeah,
Wayne
yeah,
died.
which was it was pretty sad. But his death made the papers around the world. I had calls from people, and I did a show called The Will in Canada. They had me on there to talk about Wayne, but it was kind of a sad story after he died. But uh, family members, with the will and everything. But Wayne and I, we had a pretty good team, and we had a lot of adventures. It was fun. And that's what I wanted to do, was make it fun. It got to the point where it wasn't fun anymore because we were,
Yeah.
struggling to get them on the radio, and that's one reason I drifted into rockabilly, because the passion was there with these guys, the new bands and the originals. A lot of them are still around. That's one thing I've been able to do is like, what you're doing now is you are saving music history, and as well as enjoying the music. And that's what I've done over the years. I've traveled all over interviewing hits of the past. Do you remember a record called "Treat Her Right" by Roy Head, Blue Eyed Soul thing? You ought to pick a copy up of that.
I'm not too
It's
sure. I've
Yeah.
listened.
Well, when you hear, yeah, it's fantastic. Roy Head was a white soul singer, and his hero was Joe Tex.
Oh, I know
And
Joe Tex,
oh
obviously.
yeah, 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 he was good. And so Roy Head, if I can find a copy of that, I'll let you have it. Roy was he was one of those. They don't have a lot of characters in the music business anymore. He was a true character. I mean, he was. I wrote a book called Guitar Towns, and I went to all these regional hit capitals from years ago where they made tons of hits, but today that has faded, and they don't have the infrastructure there for cutting hits anymore. So I went to New Orleans, Cincinnati, of course, Memphis, Shreveport, Louisiana, Houston, Muscle Shoals. I went to all these places, and Jackson, Mississippi. I had interviews set up with these guys ahead of time, and then after I got out on the road so many days, I couldn't set them up in advance because I didn't know how long I'd be staying at my present stop. I just called these people on the phone, say, "Hey, I'd like to interview you." And say, "Yeah, come on over." Well, there was a guy that worked out of Memphis, or I'm sorry, New Orleans years ago, before I was ever born, and Johnny Vincent, and he produced a lot of the old blues stuff there, especially by a guy named Guitar Slim. And Guitar Slim was a flamboyant blues singer in that area, and so I wanted to talk to Johnny because he was such a character. but he had a label called Ace Records, and Ace had Sea Cruise by Frankie Ford and a bunch of hits, a lot of R&B stuff. So I met Johnny. He still had Ace going when I found him. And I sat down there in his office and we had a great time. I remember I walked into his office and he had like a bunch of boxes of CDs all over, and he had people working for him. And I said, I have an appointment to see Johnny. And he was an older man at that time. And so they said, okay. So he comes out and he says, he reluctantly held out his hand to shake my hand. He goes, I can't really imitate, but what's your name again? That Mississippi accent, And I said, my name's Randy McNutt. He goes, you all ain't any relation to that lawyer up there in Jackson named McNutt, are you? And I said, no. He goes, good. You can come back in my office. Apparently he's been sued a few times. So we sat there and it was great. I had a really enjoyable time, and I did a chapter on Johnny. Well, we're sitting there, and but some of the people that he'd worked with over the years came up in conversations. And one of them was, trying to think of that guy's name, Huey Smith, that had Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu and stuff like that. I was asking about some of these people. I said, where's he at? And he says, well, he's hard to get in touch with, but he's on Ace still, And he says something about Cosmo Matassa, who was a famous recording engineer in New Orleans, and he did practically every hit from there. And I said, wow, I'd love to talk to him. He goes, well, you can. And I thought he'll give me his number, but he just said, call Matassa's Market in the Quarter, the French Quarter, and that's where he works for his sons. So I did. He said, yeah, come on over. He was a great interview. I loved talking to Cosmo, because he knew all these R&B people from New Orleans and worked on their records, and it's just. And then
I would have loved to have talked to some of these guys.
Oh yeah, I was. I did that for a number of years. Yeah. I like the originals because they're characters. I mean, they anymore you don't get characters. They're just accountants and lawyers and run the record business. Dan Penn was another one. Oh my gosh, that guy was great. Dan Penn wrote a bunch of R&B hits back in the 60s and 70s, and he is probably the best blue-eyed soul singer I ever heard. He doesn't sing very often, but he had a live cut of Two Steps from the Blues that was originally out by Bobby Blue Bland. And I knew very little about Bobby Blue Bland because I'm not into blues too much, or jazz or anything. So I got this cassette tape and I popped it in, and I thought, whoa, this guy is amazing. And he had these Muscle Shoals players behind him, and it was live. So I interviewed Dan, and he was great. He gave me a whole evening and told me all these stories about how he wrote I'm Your Puppet by James and Bobby Purify. And
what a great record.
Yeah, he wrote that.
I've actually somewhere down here I've got a test pressing of that.
Do you really? Wow, hey, now there's a collectible.
Yeah.
He wrote that. And did you remember a group called the Box Tops? It had the Letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the guy that wrote the Letter, Wayne Carson Thompson, wrote Mr. Bus Driver, and that's how I found Mr. Bus Driver, because I was interested in Wayne Thompson. Well, anyway, Wayne Thompson. Let's see, how did this go? Dan Penn wrote this song called. Oh man, let me think of this. Wayne Thompson wrote the Letter, and Dan Penn produced it. So I was down there saying, how did what happened in this session and all this, and so he remembered everything. He had total recall. It was amazing. And then, oh boy, another one that he did was trying to think of the name of that one. Cry Like a Baby by the Box Tops. I asked him, how did you write that? And he goes, Well, we had a session lined up, and the people at Bell Records are really, really down on me because my previous Box Tops record, Neon Rainbow, didn't sell that well. He said, so I had to come up with something, but I just couldn't write anything. He said, so it was an hour before the session. I didn't have anything, and I went to some little coffee shop. He said, with my co-writer Spooner Oldham, and there's a character, Spooner. What a name! So they were sitting there, and Spooner, they were up all night, couldn't come up with anything any good. So Spooner just puts his head down like this. He goes, "I could cry like a baby," and Dan said,
That's
"Cry
it.
like a baby." There you go.
Yeah.
And he starts writing this down on a napkin or something, and when I think about you, I cry like a baby, and it's just
music back then to me was just. Do you know what I mean? It was creative.
It was
passionate people who just loved to create, and
they did.
And that was one of the questions that I did want to ask you. What do you think of today's music in relation to what you experienced? Because my opinion, I just can't connect to it, and that's why I've basically gone back in time.
Yes, right. Well, and I'm glad you do, because sometimes I think, well, maybe I've lost touch, and maybe I'm living back in the past, and I don't want to do that, because when I was a producer, I would keep up with all the latest things, even though I was getting older. And all of a sudden, it got to the point where I'm thinking, well, I'm not hearing anything I like hardly. Occasionally, a record will come out that I really like, but not much. And I finally just stopped even listening to top 40 and things like that. And I do the same things. I try to find old stuff on albums and things that really interest me. Back then, one of the big parts of this that you like are the musicians, because now everything, there are live players on some of these, but a lot of it is all electronic, and you don't get the feel, I mean, and the vocals are compressed to death, and you mean, you can even put somebody on key and with auto tune. That's not my, the kind of music I like. I mean, I like a good singer and good musicians, and I like humans.
I'm totally blown away with working for MMD Records over the last couple of years, and when we're lucky enough to find people who've got multi-track masters, and then we managed to digitalize the tracks and separate them, and isolate the vocals, and you just sat there with your headphones on, you're thinking, wow, do you know what I mean? Real, just pure talent. Not, there's nothing like you said, no compression, no auto tune. Right. It's just there we go. It's just fantastic. That's right. Yeah.
You know what? When you cut a record back then, if you couldn't sing or you couldn't play, it's like suddenly like you're naked. I mean, everybody can see it, everybody can hear it. I mean, you can't fake it.
No.
Or today, a lot of it is, they can fake it today. I mean, if you're hideous, they can't. But if you can halfway sing a little bit, they can put you in tune, and even I could sing today and be, but I don't. I agree. I mean, I love I love all the stuff from the days when humans sang, and they sang songs, and humans played on records. But one of the things that I have loved over the years is how these studio rhythm bands in various cities had their own sounds. And it got to the point where if you put a record on and I didn't know who did it, I could almost tell you where it was cut.
Do you know, I try and explain this to my friends as well, and they think, how do you know that? But studying music from, like you say, there's a studio in Philadelphia, and it was called Virtue, and they and you know it, and they have this great drum and piano, and you can hear it, and you say, that's Virtue, Frank Virtue's studio.
That's right. Though they were well known. They were, that was before they kept doing things, but that was, before my day really. But they continued, and another one up there. Oh gosh, trying to think of the name of that studio that cut tons of hits back in the 70s. Oh boy, it escapes me. But there's so many studios. Um, I did a book, which I'm going to try to reissue with another name, because the name, I shouldn't have used it. It didn't identify what it is, but it's called Too Hot to Handle, an illustrated history of American recording studios. And these were all old studios. And I mean, the book turned out to be, 300 pages of nothing but pictures of studios and all the old studios.
Oh,
And I
that
had,
sounds an interesting read.
yeah, I'm interested in that. And whenever I would go out on interviews in other cities, anywhere, I would have my studio list and I would go visit the studio. And if they were not open, I'd take a picture, and
Yeah.
I found a lot of kind of abandoned studios. But I love studios, and I love acoustic echo. And a lot of those old records sound really cool because they have acoustic echo and not electronic reverb or
Mm.
echo. Um,
When you
they
say acoustic, you've got to educate me here. Is that like when they used echo chambers and things like that? Is that?
Correct. It's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And I, in my house here, I've got a hallway. It's wooden floor, and it's fairly long, and we don't have any carpeting down, and I could stand there and sing something, or yell from one of my cats or something, and it echoes like an echo chamber. It would be a great echo chamber.
Yeah.
I've been tempted to put a mic in it and run it into one of my little 4-track task amps that
Yeah.
has a cassette. Yeah, I like cassettes too, But yeah, the echo chamber. I went When I would go out on my interviews across the country looking for these kinds of things. I would try to find echo chambers. And there was a guy in Nashville. There was a little studio. It was north of Nashville in Franklin, Tennessee. And the studio was called Cinderella Sound Studios. And I thought, oh, that's a cool name. So I called the owner, who was a musician who I think he played on Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison,
Okay.
and a lot of hits from that period, 60s. And he he said, yeah, you can come over. And he said, there's nobody here, but I'll sit and talk to you. So I'm driving down this. There's a bunch of like Cape Cod homes made of brick, probably 50s, that era.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up, and there were, in the subdivision, the names were like Cinderella and all the seven dwarfs and things, the names of the streets. So I go down Cinderella Street and I get to the guy's house and I pull in the driveway. And he had it was like it was like a big garage, and he had added on to it. So it was, it wasn't really small, but it wasn't very, very large. It wasn't a large studio, but it was, you could tell it wasn't just something that somebody stuck in a tiny garage. So he showed me the place, and it was very interesting. And I said, "Wow, what do you use for echo?" He goes, "Well, I've got electronic echo basically here, and it sounds really good." He goes, I said, "Gee, I'm looking for some of the old echo chambers." He goes, "You want to see one?" I said, "Well, sure." So he takes me outside, and there's just kind of like a little building. It'd be like I don't know. I don't really know. It was small. I mean, it wasn't very big, and it was made of concrete blocks. He goes, "This was my original echo chamber." He said, "I put a mic in it, and I ran it in here to the board or whatever." And he said, "It sounded pretty good." He said, then one day, a friend of mine, and this guy was a great songwriter, Mickey Newberry, out of Nashville. He did a lot of, his songs were just really what you were talking about, from the heart things.
Yes. Yes.
And they were cut in all kind of musical genres. But Mickey was a really good singer. Had some albums out over here on Elektra. And so Mickey Newberry came in, and he was one that wanted sound effects on records, like on the letter where at the beginning it's got the jet, and on my Mr. Bus Driver it's got the bus.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so he brought a can of crickets, and he wanted to get these crickets chirping on one of his real mellow little songs, and then at the end faded out, and it'd be like in the night, the crickets, you know. So the can, he forgot to take it with him. So the can fell over, and the crickets in this dark, damp place, the crickets were in there. And every time that the owner wanted to do a record, he turns up the echo, these crickets and chirp, chirp, chirp. So that's why he got rid of it and had, you know.
That's a fantastic story. Yeah. That's great.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You know, my biggest thrill in doing recording and stuff doesn't come from making my records. It comes from talking to these people that were people that I was in awe of. And a lot of them weren't big time people. They were just,
well,
kinda, you know.
I can totally relate to that. I would much, I find the people who do these, you know, low key records and maybe go in and do one cut, I find them people so interesting because they don't realize their talent a lot of the time. They don't realize what they had. And I find that fascinating how MD Records are just releasing, well, it should be coming out in February, a reissue of a track that was done in Detroit. And this guy came from the South and then came up to live in Detroit, and they recorded a track called Deep South because he was from the South coming up to the and they just got together. They said, oh, well, I'm from the South. Let's go into a studio, cut this. And that was it. And he said, we cut it, we sang it, we just moved on to our normal jobs. And I'm like,
yep. Those things they're fascinating. And some of that stuff is terrific. And in its day, it just, the problem was promotion. If you didn't get any promotion to radio.
They all say the same. Everyone I speak to, especially, you know, the black artists, they just talk about payola, you know, trying to pay these white radio DJs money to get their tracks on the station. It's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. One of these days, you could look on YouTube, look up Roy Head. This guy, he took me out. He had this, it was an old Chevy Blazer, which is like a forerunner of the SUVs, and he had a crack going up the windshield like this, and he put me in the front seat, and he had this pretty good radio or pretty good CD player. So he had cut an album, and nothing ever came of it. You know, I mean, I said, that's fantastic stuff. He said, no, nobody'd want this. Who wanted to hear me? You know, and I said, I do.
Yeah, and me too.
He pops this thing in, and there was a track on there that was just mind blowing. And Stevie Ray Vaughan played on it, and different people from down that way. And Roy Head cranks that thing up full blast, and I'm in the front seat, and it just about blew my eardrums out. I'm going like this. They turn it down, Roy. And he's sitting there, you know, But yeah, he's really good. I mean, this guy, he could. He told me a story once. The time he bit Elvis on the leg, and and Elvis was in some movie theater that he rented for just himself to see a movie, and he had his entourage there. And Roy Head knew him or something, and he came in and walked down there, and he said, I bet some guy that if I could get in here to see Elvis, that I'd get on my knees and bite Elvis on the leg. So he did it, and Elvis said, what are you doing? And Elvis's bodyguards pulled him out and knocked him around out in the alley. Yeah. He had stories that were unbelievable. Fantastic. These guys are just amazing, you know. It's just, but I love getting around. You know, Muscle Shoals was really cool. I'll tell you this little story about the studio, and you probably have a lot of records that were cut there from Muscle Shoals Sound Studios. A lot of soul, and
we are actually currently, well, it's just been announced. We're just working with Terry Woodford at the minute from Muscle
Yeah.
Shoals, and we're releasing an unreleased. I actually bought a master tape from America that went up for auction, and it was a Wishbone
Oh,
Studios
yeah, I remember that.
master. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wishbone Studios master tape, and the tracks on it was by a group called Bottom and Company, and
Oh,
yeah, we've just connected with Terry, and we've just worked out a licensing deal to put these tracks out for the
oh,
first
that's
time.
great.
So I
Yeah.
love the Muscle Shoals
Yeah.
sound
Yeah.
and Fame
Yeah.
Studios as well.
Oh, he's good. He's good. Yeah. Yeah. Wishbone, I've got that in my book too. All the old studios around there. I went down there I took a big trip down there on vacation one time, and my wife, I dragged her along, and I'll tell you, I have never experienced heat like that summer. It was unbelievable. My car air conditioner went out.
No, no.
The humidity was just awful. And so she was over in the passenger seat, cranked back like this, and she had a, a, a wet towel, and she put it over like this. And after a while, I didn't know if she was still alive. I thought, I hate to even ask if she, So we pull up in Muscle Shoals, and I find the studio. This was the original. So I pull up in this little gravel driveway, and she didn't go in. She goes, I can't deal with it. So uh, the door was open, and there was a bunch of uh, washers and dryers, old ones, out in front. So I get up there, and this guy rolls up in a wheelchair, and he had a undershirt on. It was all stained with perspiration and everything. And he says to me, "Can I interest you in a used washer?" And I said, "No, no, not really." I said, "But I came here to see the studio." He goes, "Oh yeah, we get somebody every once in a while that comes in looking at this." He goes, "Well, come on in." He wheels around, and we go down this aisle. There are nothing but old appliances all over the place. It was a used appliance.
Which studio is this now?
This was the original Muscle Shoals Sound Studios,
Okay,
where a lot of
okay,
the hits were done.
yeah.
Yeah, one I liked out of there was Lulu. Oh me, oh my, I'm a fool for you, baby. That was a good record, but there were so many hits done there. And but anyway, the guy wheels along, and he takes me to the back, and they had the console. They didn't have the console, but they had the control room was still there with the glass window. And
Yes, yeah.
he goes, he says, there's where those boys sat and made all their records, and everything. And of course, the engineer sat in there, but the studio wasn't that big at all. But now it's been turned into a museum and totally renovated. And they don't sell used dryers there anymore.
No, that's great. That's great. That is one place that I would like to get across to and visit,
Yeah,
especially after educating myself and talking to Terry recently. I mean, you start
yeah.
learning these things.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Incredible.
He's one of the one of those guys down there that were there when all that was happening.
Yeah.
Um, I went down, let's see, a second time, and I got a hold of David Hood, who was the bass player with the Swampers rhythm section that did all the hits,
Yeah.
that owned the original studio. And he said, "Well, we have our new studio," and it was in an old, really big naval training center. And they bought it or whatever from the government, and they had made a studio in it and everything. So he took me on a tour, and it was interesting. But I liked the old one because it was small, intimate setting and everything. But they made a lot of their later hits in that old naval reserve center. And as the '70s went on into the early '80s, they were still going pretty strong. And they had Delbert McClinton, "Get It Up for Your Love" or whatever. I think they did that there, and other hits. But as time goes by, things change, and all the old, what I call them is regional music centers. I don't know if, for lack of a better term, I don't know what to call them. But you had, as I said, Memphis was big, and it still does stuff, but and they had their own sound kind of. And then they had sounds within sounds, like over at American Sound Studios. Chips Moman ran it, and his what they call them, oh, I forget. They have a name for the something boys, and they were the players that gave that sound that he wanted. It was sort of a little soul, a little pop, and it was identifiable.
Yes, yes.
And then you had your R&B stuff over at the old Royal Theater where they did a lot of the high records things. And I went over there. American Sound was no longer standing; it was a parking lot. Um, and I went to different places, but the let me see. Oh, I was going to tell you about the studio there at American. Chips Moment, I loved that guy's stuff. I mean, he did some really interesting records. He was I think he co-wrote that Dark End of the Street or whatever that ballad was, and so he was terrific. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago, but there were a lot of people that I met when I went out that I couldn't record there, but I could talk to them.
Yeah.
And these studios, they had the cooperative radio stations, they had the song publishing, they had the artist, they had what I call an infrastructure to put out a hit record, and promotion too. They had promotion men, but the main thing, they had enthusiasm for their hometowns.
Mm.
And radio stations would pop a record on that was from a local guy, and then if it hit, then a big New York label or something would lease the master. Well, that's what I wanted to find, some of that, and it was the tail end of it, and these guys were still around. And I went out to L.A. and interviewed Bob Keane that had Keane Records, and oh boy, so many different ones. But I was lucky to get them. I see now how I didn't fully appreciate it then, that I could find these people, but they were still around.
So when you was out interviewing, and what was you doing with the contents that you was getting then? Was it just for you, or was then you? I know you was working for newspapers as well. What was the content for with the interviews? Once you been out and seen these studios, what was you doing with that?
Well, mainly I didn't do them for publications. I saved them for myself.
Yeah.
Although sometimes I would do a freelance article for a magazine based on an interview that I had. But mainly I wanted it for myself, and then I write books and I'd put them. I would do stories about these guys and put them in books. I had the book Guitar Towns was essentially my trips that I made in a period of about 3 or 4 years, and I was able to go around and find a lot of these old regional music centers and see the studios and talk to the players and the arrangers and producers, different things. I was able to find some of that, and today, of course, you couldn't find it, but I was able to save that. It's just sort of like you saving the music and documenting that for future generations.
That's it. That is with the Soul Archive. That is it, because we've got a bit of an advantage being young, and both me and my partner Charlotte run the Soul Archive, and it's been birthed out of lockdown really, and pulling all this together. But it's something needs to be done now if anything's ever going to be done, and it's not been done in the past in this way that we're pulling it together. And it's like you said about Wayne Perry. His track is loved over here in the UK. It's been danced to for many years, and now you told us in this interview that he sadly passed away. People probably don't know that, and now is that track, it will make him immortal really through this interview, and people have a bit of background information about him.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad now that when I made the record up, wrote the copy for the label, I'm glad I put Little Flint featuring Wayne Perry, because he didn't care. He just said, call it Little Flint. It'll be like a rock band, But he liked to do, straight out rock and roll too. So he I think there was a I can't think of the name of a band that was similar to Little Flint, and he just had a takeoff on that. But yeah, the what you're doing is kind of like what I did,
Yeah, yeah,
except mine's with words and yours is the music. But
yeah.
I was lucky to capture these people in words and photographs. And then in the future, if somebody's interested, they can look at my book, which is now out
Yeah.
of print, but I hope to get it back into print. Um,
I hope you do as well. I
yeah,
really do hope you do.
I'm probably going to do it.
Yeah.
I had somebody type it all out for me to reissue sometime, but I I've had a number of books over the years that I've written about this stuff. Gosh, I really don't even remember. I've had at least a half a dozen, but I have one called King Records of Cincinnati, and that's all photos of all the old R&B acts and old country acts. But I'm sure a lot of your viewers know of King Records and
Oh
its
yeah.
history and
King Records, yeah, huge, huge.
yeah, it was.
I love stuff from King.
Well, this is what I mean when I say these regional music centers, like Cincinnati. Uh, it, Here, they look at all the hits they put out nationally,
Mm.
and then not only that, but Fraternity Records was here, and they
Oh
put
yeah.
out quite a few hits, and Lonnie Mack and different ones. But this is dried up nationally. Everything now is kind of homogenized,
Yes, yes,
and you
yes.
have kind of everything kind of sounds alike. I can't explain it, but you turn on the radio and everybody's kind of got the same sound, sonically. It's just I can't, I think it's the equipment, the way they things go through phases where it's a fad and everybody wants to make something sound like something
And
that gets a
and I think young people in the UK are realizing this as well. There is so many people, whether they might not be into soul music like us, although there is quite a big community of. Everybody knows each other who's younger into soul music, but you've got other subcultures and of people that have young generation in it, but everybody's kind of looking back now, and it is sad, but it's good at the same time. It's sad that there isn't. It's clear that
yeah.
but who
So many things from the UK that I've loved over the years. I mean, and this goes back, when I was a kid on through, gosh, even in the in the 80s, some of those bands, Swing Out Sister, I love those guys. Just I
well
mean, I like all kinds of music. So,
the
but I
girl,
used to
I cannot remember her name from that
uh,
group, Swing Out
Corrine
Sister.
Drury or something like
Yes,
that.
that's
Yeah,
it. Yeah, she
yeah.
is big into soul music, and she comes. I've seen her many a times at events that I've been DJing at.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I like that one. The Am I the Same Girl? That R&B version of that Barbara Acklin, I believe,
Oh
did the
yeah,
original.
yeah.
And but yeah, I really love those guys and Johnny Hates Jazz and all those different
Mm.
'80s groups. I liked them. Gosh, so much good stuff from over your way. Back in the '60s, '70s. It just they just a lot of we were lucky to get a lot of that stuff over here that was leased or somebody got the rights to it or something. So
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the label you're talking about.
Okay.
Do you work for them, or is that your label? Or
MD Records. It was set up by my two partners, Mark Anderson and Des Parker.
okay,
So they set it up basically to put out unreleased music first. So they had Des has been going across to America since
okay,
I think it was the 80s. I think he started going over in the 80s and
uh-huh.
making connections. And
Mhm.
he had lots of connections in Philadelphia,
Uh-huh.
meeting with people like what you said you was doing, going around studios and just meeting with these people. Didn't want anything from them, but made contacts and connections. And then they've offered some music to him, and he's done licensing deals, and that's how
Yeah,
it started really. And I've always been big into just researching, connecting with people. I always go off like through websites like BMI. If I've got a record that I love, then I'll start looking at all the label credits on it, and I'll start tracing back and see if I can find these people.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing when I met you with the Gordon
Uh-huh.
Neal track, the David Thomas record on Prime. So they took an interest in that, and seeing that I was connecting with people, and they asked if I'd like to come on board because I was, you know, being offered
That's great.
material. And so there is now, I think there's 4 labels they've got now. So they've got one label for the unreleased tracks, they've got
Uh-huh.
one label for doing reissue stuff, and then they've got like a contemporary label, and so they've got a lot of things going. But we've got a good catalogue of music behind us now, and we've got so, you know, we're working with Terry Woodford and
Oh yeah.
Frank Bendinelli in Philadelphia. We're working.
Yeah.
He had connections with Cap Records, which we mentioned earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
Larkin Newell in Detroit as well. So it's really coming together well. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming
Finding
together.
stuff like that's like, you know, walking along and you discover some gold mine or silver mine. I mean, it's just, it's there. Nobody
Mhm.
pays much attention to it
It
suddenly.
excites me so much. This
Yeah.
over the last 2 weeks, I found a guy who owned a studio in Detroit, moved out to LA, and he told me he had an in-house girl group band, and I've now managed to trace the 2 girls in that group, reconnect him with them 2 girls, and he's just over
That's
the
great.
moon with that. And then
Yeah.
he's came forward and told us, well, you know, I've actually got a couple of master tapes of these girls, and it's just like, wow. But he's never heard it. He's not listened to this music for 50 years. He's just been sat on them doing other things, like you said, moved on, didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
So we've just offered to digitalize his tape. So it's so exciting. So
Yeah.
exciting.
That it's amazing to me that these things can, you know, I mean, here's, for example, all my tapes, well, you know, a real, the real tape box, I mean, with the size of that. And I had, I had a green plastic garbage bag that, you know, large bag. And I just threw all my tapes in this thing. And it was sitting in the second floor of my mother's house. And it must have been 90 degrees up there in the summer, 95. And, you know, I stored them there because I didn't have enough room in my house. Suddenly, I'm thinking, hey, I got all my tapes in this
Yeah.
hot room. And, but they were okay. You know, I mean, the old tape really was really durable.
It
Um,
surprises a lot of people, actually, because
yes.
people say, well, I've had these tapes for 50 years. I've never played them. Do you think
Uh-huh.
they're going to be all right? And I was like, well, just give them to us. We'll see what we can do.
That's
And
right.
9 times out of 10, we have to put them through like a baking process now,
Right.
because they do deteriorate, but you can rewind it
Yeah.
almost, and put it in. It's basically like a plate oven. You put them in,
Yes, it is.
and you put it in for, I think, 12 hours or something.
Uh-huh.
The guy who we work with, he's in LA actually, but we
Yeah.
send all our tapes to LA to be digitalized. He bakes them for 12 hours, and then
Yeah.
it stops them from any sort of shredding and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Had those baked for that 70s sold out CD. I had them all baked beforehand because I was a little worried, you know, that would they would it, the all the oxide or whatever would be ripped off.
Yeah.
I had that happen one time on a master tape, and you know, it was bad. I got a call from an engineer the other day. Said, "Hey, you want me to bake that thing? I got an oven now." I said, "Well, I guess you could, but it's pretty
Yeah.
bad, you know."
When someone said to me for the very first time, "Oh, you need to bake them tapes," I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
He says, "Yeah. You basically, we have a special type of oven, and we put it in
yeah,
at such a temperature." I'm like, "Are you sure? Are you
yeah.
sure?" And he's like, "Yeah." So yeah, I've
The first time
educated
somebody,
myself since.
yeah, the first time somebody told me that, I thought the guy was kidding.
Yeah.
You know, I thought he was just, you know, I thought, oh, what, you know, come on. But yeah, along the way with that tape, you know, you learn something.
But
I love
the sound from master tapes is just so warm, and
it is.
sometimes when you get it on, when we have our sound system set up and we put the tape player on and we get a master tape in, it's
Uh-huh.
incredible. It's as if they are, and it's so great as well when
Yeah.
a track was put out in the 60s, and it had a very limited release, and all the copies of this track, which are now found, beat up, battered, and the sound quality on them is really bad now on the 45s. To then discover the master tape and hear it in clear format, it's just, it's like, say, preserving history, and it's great.
It really is. To me, you can't beat audio tape recording with an acoustic echo chamber used, monaural record. It's just sort of, there's something about that sound, with a mono record and the echo chamber and the whole thing. It gives you a sense of, I mean, I wouldn't want to listen to that mono all the time, but it's kind of cool to listen to it in retrospect, But this is the way it was intended to be heard when the makers put it together, and it's kind of neat to know that some producer back in the 50s or 60s was actually wanting people to hear it this way, and you don't hear anything like that anymore.
I said the only thing that upsets me is these old discs. When you get the studio acetates, the acetate discs, because you like we emailed when we talked, you get these discs and they smell. You can smell them as well, the lacquer on them. But you can get one-offs on them and things. It is so upsetting when you can't find the original master tapes. You find an acetate, but then the lacquer's all peeling off them and everything. Yeah. It's so bad.
Yeah, those things had a limited life,
Yeah. But it's been fantastic talking to you, Randy. And do you know what? This has probably been one of the easiest interviews. I've only done a couple, but it's been the easiest one, and it's been the most enjoyable one because I've just sat back and took it all in listening to you. And
thank you.
I am so excited to put this out on our Soul Archive YouTube page, and I hope you'll look back and share it with your friends as well. And
I will. Yeah. I'll put something on it, a link to it on my. I have a little blog, and Home of the Hits at blogspot.com. And honestly, I don't have much time to work on it, so I might go 6 months without putting something new on it. But then suddenly I'll pop something on there. But when something like this comes up, I'll just say, hey, take a listen to this or whatever, and so I'll put that on there. I don't know why people even. It's amazing to me that people will find that with no. There's, I don't do any kind of publicity or anything. I mean, it's just somebody stumbles upon it.
Yeah, well, that's how I found you. I think it was through that website. Yeah, I think that's how I found your email address through that. And I think it was because you had mentioned Herman on the About Me section on it, and I thought, oh, this guy's worked with Herman Lewis. Let's drop it in an email. So people are finding it. It's out there. It's working.
Oh yeah, Herman. Do you have a record he did called Mr. Heartbreak? It was on Magic Touch or something label, but I've got that. I've tried to get some of Herman's records just for the personal connection,
Yes.
And I find that every time, that I think I've got them all, then I see something pop up somewhere that I don't have.
Well, it's like that one I sent you the other day, the Gigi and the Charmaines record.
Oh, that was a good one. Yeah,
that's an incredible 45. That is. I first heard that down at the 100 Club in London on Oxford Street, and the guy who runs a big label in the UK, a label we really look up to, Ace Kent Records. I don't know where he got that from, but it's from Studio Master Tape, and it had never been released, and he did a limited. It's fantastic.
Oh, it is. That's good stuff. Honestly, I didn't know that Gigi could sing that well, because I never heard. I heard a little bit of what she did over the years when she was with the Charmaines. She sang lead, but some of those records were pretty bad. I mean, the grooves were worn off practically, and I really couldn't get a sense of. I mean, she sounded like Martha Reeves and stuff sometimes on there.
Yeah.
Really, really great stuff. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to leave it there, and it's been fantastic. Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
And I look
Great.
forward to exchanging a few more emails with you.
Sure. I love it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's great to talk to somebody that I share something with, the passion for the music. And
Oh, that shines through with you. You can definitely
yeah,
see it.
well, you too, it connected right away there, didn't it?
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. Thank you
Okay.
so much. And
You're welcome.